Hello, Blake Rudis here with Everyday HDR and HDRinsider.com, and today I want to take a closer look at Topaz Glow. Now, I know I looked at this before, but I want to take a more in-depth look because I've seen how I can take a program that I thought was nearly useless for my workflow and turn it into probably the most useful in my workflow. And we're going to do this by discussing two very important blending options, and those are screen and soft light, so that we can achieve a very nice room glow like this in Topaz Glow, and also a very nice edge glow like this. Ooh, look at that. Alright, so let's start to take a closer look at Topaz Glow and just how powerful it can be when you don't look at it as a fractal-based program. So what I want to do is start with the screen blending option, and to do that I've made a little demonstration piece, because the screen blending option, what the blending options do are they allow you to blend your topmost layer with the layers underneath it in very interesting ways, and each blending mode does something different. Now I'm not going to discuss all of these, I'm just going to go and discuss screen and soft light. So for instance, right now we're going to be discussing screen. When you press the screen blending option, anything that is black is pretty much going to disappear. Anything that is white is going to remain unchanged, and any color that is in that layer is going to multiply itself, invert itself, and apply itself to the underlying layer. So it's really interesting what screen does to your image. Let's go ahead and go back to normal again and see the difference there. So pay attention to any areas that are black, like you see here, and anything that is red, watch how it affects the image, and then anything that is white is going to remain unchanged. So we go and press screen, watch what happens. Pretty interesting, huh? So how does this play into Topaz Glow? Well, let's just go ahead and we'll get rid of this layer for now and duplicate the background by pressing Command or Control J. Go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and Glow. Now within Topaz Glow there are a lot of presets, and some of these presets, when you look at them, you think, why would I ever use that? Well, if you just go to the neon presets and look at something like Blazing Neon or Blazing Neon 2, these are very fractal based effects. But when you look at them, there's a lot of black in these. Look at this. Look at these really dark black ones. Like the Glowing Wires is actually one of my favorite. Glowing Wires 2 and Glowing Wires 1. Glowing Wires 2 is more one of my favorites than the Glowing Wires 1 because it's slimmer and thinner. Now, watch what happens when I go down to the blending option and change that to screen. So if we look really closely, it doesn't look like anything changed, but what we have is anywhere in our image that's a highlight, we have these really interesting sweeps of light that's just coming across our photo that looks really interesting. Alright, so right now they've got a very strong color cast because they've got this neon setting. Let's go ahead and take a look at, let's take a zoomed in look. We'll zoom right in here so you can see this. So here's the before, here's the after with the screen blending option on something like Glowing Wires 2. You can also go into those options and play with the options, experiment with the options, because one of the things that I want to show you here is if we just go ahead and reduce these two glows and go into the color section, here we can change the individual hue saturation of a different color. So if I go to the cyans, I can increase the saturation in those cyan streaks. I can apply a different hue to those cyan streaks so they start to turn kind of purplish. So here you can go into each and every color and determine what you want those individual colors to look like when you manipulate their hues. Okay, so you can change the lightness and darkness of those. If you want those yellows to be a little bit darker so they kind of fade and blend in with your background, that's great. Or you can go to the overall, and this is one of my favorite things to do here. Drop that overall saturation to 0. We'll actually go back into our yellows and make that change also. So when you drop that overall saturation to 0, you just get these really gleaming highlights that just kind of bounce all over this photograph, and it can be pretty effective. If it's too much, you can just drop the strength on there. Okay. So if we go ahead and press, let's actually look at some of these other settings. So if we go within each one of these secondary and primary glows, it might be easiest to go and change this back to normal to see what's going on with our photograph and put the strength all the way up. So if you look here, our photo is pretty much black and white. So we can dictate how much of that we're seeing, because like we saw in the screen blending option, black things disappear and white things remain unchanged. So the whiter these lines get, the more bright that highlight is going to be on that image. So if we increase the electrify and make these bigger lines, well, when we change that back to the screen blending option, you can see that they're a little bit more vibrant. All right, so we boost that electrify up. Simplify details. What if we don't want the details simplified? What if we want these really crisp, clean lines? Then we can just drop that simplify details, because if we go to and press normal, you can see that when you increase the simplify details, everything starts to get kind of blurry and fuzzy. When you drop the simplify details, everything starts to get these nice thin lines. The detail strength also. So if we drop the detail strength all the way down, we start to get these kind of fuzzier lines. So when we change that to screen, they're a little bit more realistic of highlight streaks rather than all the way up where you've got these really long, sweeping, detailed streaks of light hitting your image. Overall brightness, if we want to make those really bright and make them really bright white, if we go back and change that to normal, and you look at the brightness, you can see that controls just how much of these streaks are hitting our image with this neon color. So if we increase that brightness and we keep all of these settings the same, and we go back into the saturation and see what that would look like as a neon image, that's what that neon preset now looks like. But when you drop the overall saturation and change that to screen, we're losing anything black, gaining anything white, and really punching up some of the highlight and those swooping streaks on our image. It's a lot different than looking at your image like this, for instance. It's instead of looking at it as a fractal based art, you can look at this as a way to apply some really intricate highlights to your image. So let's just go back to that glowing wires 2 really quickly. We'll go into the options, drop that saturation, and change that to screen. Alright, so we'll go ahead and press OK. The beauty of this is that you now have it on a separate layer. So if there are areas in this photo that you don't want those highlight streaks, you can just click on that layer, create a mask, paint with black on your image. Go ahead and drop that hardness down so it's a nice soft edge brush. And if I paint with black on my photograph, I can go ahead and get rid of those areas where I don't want that effect to appear. So anything that is a natural highlight, I might want to put a little gleam on there, but anything that should be darker, I'll just go ahead and mask that out so it's not so dark on those dark areas, but it's nice and gleaming on the areas that it should be. So maybe reduce some of it on this floor a little bit, and then maybe some of it inside here. I kind of like it on these glowing window cases. I think that looks pretty interesting. Maybe reduce it a little bit here. You also have the ability to change the opacity so it's not so bright. And that's what I really like about having this on its own separate layer. Let's take a look at how this looks with soft light. Okay, so soft light is a little bit different than screen in that soft light, if anything is 50% gray, it disappears. Anything that's black that's added to that layer makes things darker, and anything that's white added to that layer makes things brighter. So anything above 50% gray will make that image darker. Anything below 50% gray will make that image brighter. So here we have a 50% gray background or layer right here. And if I go ahead and let me just change my brush as a default here, and I will brush on a black streak here and brush on a white streak here, and we go ahead and change this to soft light, you'll see that anything above gets really dark, anything below gets really white, because anything that is above 50% gray is going to make it darker, anything below 50% gray is going to make it lighter. So what does this mean for Topaz Glow? Well, if we press Command or Control J, we go into our filter, go to Topaz Labs, and go to Glow. We can do some really interesting room glows with this. So what I'm going to do is I have a preset here that I call Room Glow. I made this preset in mind for making room glows. Now, the numbers are kind of subjective to the image, so we'll go ahead and look at what actually makes this image have a brighter glow when we get into the actual settings, but let's change this to soft light. So when we change that to soft light, you can see that we get this nice glowing room. All right, because if we look at the actual layer, anything that is above 50% gray is going to make it darker. Anything below 50% gray is going to make it whiter. But how do you know what 50% gray is? Well, let's change this to grayscale and we'll find out. So if we go down here into color, drop that overall saturation to 0, now we can see what's above and below 50% gray. So when we change this back to soft light, we can see a nice glow in our room that has no color cast. So it's only affecting the tone in our image and not the color, because we don't want it to affect our color, just our tone. So what makes this effect happen? Well, it's the glow strength, number 1, and it's the electrify, number 2. And then we also have the simplify details, the effect sharpness, kind of work hand in hand together. So if we simplify these details all the way up, we get a very blurry kind of room glow. And the reason why is if we go to normal and we look at this, it's kind of a blurry room glow. Well, if we drop the simplify details down and then maybe increase the detail strength a little bit, we're going to have these more strict lines. All right, so if we change that to soft light, you're going to see that our glow is less hazy and it's more rigid. So if we drop that detail strength, we get more of a hazy room glow around our photograph. So you can bring that detail strength up, and then you can also adjust the detail size. So if we adjust that detail size up really high, go ahead and look at how this looks in normal, drop that detail size, we're basically dictating how large our details look in this glowing effect. So the bigger that number is, the higher that you go up on that scale, the more of a glowing effect you're going to get around your photograph. So if we drop that detail size, we'll be all right. We can also adjust the secondary glow. So here's our primary glow, now here's our secondary glow. So we can use the secondary glow to kind of counteract what's happening with our primary glow. So if we change this to something like dark, let's go ahead and change this to normal, and then we'll change this to dark. And you can see that everything gets slightly darker, but look at our settings here. If we drop the glow strength, we drop that effect sharpness, we drop that simplify details, and we change this back to soft light, you can see that our glow effect is not so powerful anymore. When we change that to light, that secondary glow helps amplify the primary glow. If we set it to dark, it will help offset that primary glow and make it not so poignant. All right, so this is just a subtle glow at this point. So like I said before, you don't have to really concern yourself too much with the actual settings. What helps here is knowing what's going to happen with those glows, those primary and secondary glows, and how they're going to react with one another to make this room glow like it is. So if we change that back to light and we boost that electrify up, we should get a much more electrified look. Change that effect sharpness, change the simplify details, and you see our glow gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Now, let's go ahead and open this up in Photoshop, and I'll show you something a little bit different here. How does this change than anything that you could do in Photoshop before? Well, in Photoshop you could do something very similar, and it's called a soft glow, soft light glow. So you can Command or Control J, duplicate your background, go to Filter, go to Blur, and you would Gaussian blur this until all the details are kind of just wiped away, and it's almost abstract. So there's about good, about 50. Press OK. Change that to soft light, and we have relatively the same thing. Here we have a color cast though, so we'd have to press Control or Command Shift U to get rid of that color cast, and we can maybe control that with our opacity sliders. But it's really a one and done type thing. All we have is this effect. We don't have something like the Topaz glow where we get the ability to actually dictate how large or how small our glowing effect is going to be. So to sum all of this up, you don't want to look so literally at Topaz Glow and literally at Topaz Glow as being a fractal-based program and more as the ability to make your images glow, just like the name implies. Yes, it is a fractal-based program, but what it can do is well beyond the fractal base. So what happened with me here was when I first looked at Topaz Glow, I said there is no way I'm ever going to fit this into my workflow. I honestly said that. I even had conversations with people about this. But then, as I started to adjust my mindset around it, Topaz Glow has become something that I am probably more than likely going to be finishing all of my images off with, because I really have this ability to manipulate those highlights and pull the viewer in, navigate them around my photo, and really have the ability to make some really compelling photos. I like the way this looked before, but I really like the way this looks after. It's almost like I turned all the lights on and amplified them just a little bit more. All right, Again, I'm Blake Rudis with Everyday HDR and HDRinsider.com. If you like this, please share it, like it, comment on it, do whatever it is that you want to do with it. But the most important thing is put it to use. If this is something that you like, see how it can fit into your workflow. Thank you very much.